Your attention span might not be as broken as you think. My name's TJ, I'm a neuroscientist and I've helped over 108,000 people through my research lab build healthier brains, break their phone addictions and reclaim their attention. And through the years of going so deep on this topic, it's become very clear to me that the problem people face isn't necessarily that they're lacking willpower or they're just super lazy. It's that 99% of them, and I'd include myself in this for years and years, just have forgotten what it feels like to be bored. And when you fix this, your life changes rapidly. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to retrain your brain to love boredom so that you can rediscover the attention span that you never actually really lost. But here's the deal. Right now, I need you to put this video on full screen at normal speed and close the comments. You see, 90% of my personal YouTube consumption time has been spent trawling through the comments to keep my brain stimulated. If right now, you put this on full screen and you close the comments, you won't just be watching a video about how to rebuild your attention span forever. You'll actually be completing your first rep. So first we need to understand, why is it that so many of us, again, myself included, are unbelievably addicted to these screens? And why even after watching hundreds of videos about how to retrain our brain, we stay in the same patterns day in, day out? The first reason that we got to look at is we as humanity have developed a deep fear of boredom. And I have felt this myself. Like, I remember when I first started really understanding the research and the benefits of boredom, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just go for a walk in the quiet and sit on my sofa in the quiet and eat my food in the quiet. And then I would sit there and my brain would be like so noisy and anxious and worried and focused on the negative. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is my brain so negative? Even if there were good things happening in my life, still, my brain would just be thinking, oh, what's going on? I don't know about this quiet, boring time. And so I went really deep into this, into the research, like what's making us fear boredom, how beneficial is boredom, how can we learn to embrace boredom, and then as a result of embracing boredom, how much stronger will our attention span be? And all I can say is I've gone from someone that was super ADHD my whole life, no attention span, jumping around like crazy between tasks, to someone that just a few days ago managed to sit down and write my next book that I'm working on for 2 hours and 12 minutes of pure sustained attention. And that was unfathomable to me before I learned about these aspects of the brain. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn why we fear the boredom, what brain network would activate if we got more bored, what neurochemical we need to work on that you'll have likely never heard of, and then, and this is the exciting part, based on this, I'm going to give you a very simple experiment that you can actually immediately run in your life. The way in which we create such amazing change for people's brains and therefore their lives at our research lab is by giving people experiments that they can test out and then observe the changes that occur. That's exactly what we're going to do in this video. And just so you know, in every video that I release every week, there's going to be a new experiment that you can test to get your brain to feel and perform at a much better level. So get subscribed for that if you're down to build a healthier brain. So first of all, why do we actually fear boredom? Now this is interesting. When you scroll these phones, you know how it somewhat feels relaxing? You're like there and you're like, oh yeah, this is so nice, just nailing content and distracting myself from everything that's important and numbing my pain. At least that's what I experience when I scroll them. What's actually happening is, while it may feel soothing because it's surging that dopamine chemical in your brain, your body is actually experiencing a deeply stressful and fearful state. So your heart rate's getting faster, you're moving into what's called beta brainwaves, and it's actually making you very alert and on guard. The challenge that occurs is if we spend hours and hours in this fearful sympathetic nervous system state, we're like, oh, what's out there, like our early ancestors' brains would have done, but the phone is training this. It means that when you sit in the quiet and you're like, oh yeah, some dude on YouTube told me to embrace boredom because boredom is the cure and I should do a dopamine detox. And then you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh my God, this is horrible being in this state. The reason it's so horrible is because the phone has put you into a state of fear by overusing it. And then when you're in the quiet, you experience much more viscerally that fear that it's created. So the first point, of course, is going to be how we're going to scroll these things less. And it's a big objective of mine in life. It might be my number one objective in my whole life is my relationship with technology. And that might sound dramatic, but my relationship with technology is what's going to impact my ability to achieve my dreams, my ability to connect with my beautiful partner, my ability to raise my beautiful new daughter. So this relationship is so central. So boredom is going to be good for my brain because everyone seems to be saying that, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I hate boredom and it makes me feel freaking anxious. So I don't want to be bored. And that's when I had to go deeper into the research. Now, a big 2016 study looked at something called the default mode network. This is an area of your brain that your brain defaults to whenever it's not being stimulated by something. So right now, for example, you're actually not in your default mode network. You're in something called your executive control network, where your attention is focused on something. Then if, for example, after this video, you were to lie on the sofa and just sort of stare out the window like this, you'd begin to access your default mode network. You could think of it as your daydreaming network. Now, interestingly, with your attention, when you spend time in your default mode network, your executive control network gets a break, this attentional network that focuses on things. And part of the reason that you might be struggling so much with your attention span is because you never actually give your attention a rest. And when you give it a rest with the default mode network activation, suddenly the juices begin to recover. But then for me, I was like, okay, great. So the juices will recover and I'll have a better attention if I spend time daydreaming. But then I hate daydreaming because it makes me feel anxious. So then I had to learn to love that state. How I learned to love that state is by understanding this research on what's called self-projection. What this research discovered is when you spend prolonged periods of time in your default mode network, your brain begins to naturally experience self-projection. And what that is your brain asking yourself important questions about your future and how you could improve the future that you're heading towards. Now, I'm someone that really cares about my future. As I just shared, I care about my work, I care about my family, my lifestyle. So I started waking up in the morning and not going straight into my phone, which was basically the most impossible task of all time, and trying to just have a boring morning. So I'd kind of wake up, brush my teeth in the boredom, eat my overnight oats in the boredom, walk outside in the boredom, and I'd be there thinking, oh, I need my phone. What if there's an emergency? What if something's happened with my research lab? What if my parents have got into trouble? Whatever it might be. But what I started to notice is in these boring mornings, not only were my attention networks getting to rest, which was heaven, because that means they would work really well when I sit down to work. But interestingly, my brain was coming up with really good ideas. And I was also building a deeper relationship with myself. And what you know in the deepest neuroscience of habit change is change doesn't occur through willpower. Change occurs through identity change and who you believe you are. I now begin to identify myself as a man that wants to be a great dad, a great provider for my family, a man that wants to make sure my daughter doesn't grow up addicted to screens. So suddenly, because I have this really deep identity change, I really care about my addiction to this screen because it's much bigger than, oh, it's just a bit of doom scrolling, who cares? And it's like, wow, this is really going to affect the things I value most deeply. So this is the first part of the experiment. We're thinking boring mornings, we're thinking activating our default mode network so that our attentional networks, our executive control network, gets a rest first thing in the morning so that when we work, it's going to work really, really well. And we're also getting this opportunity for the deeper questions with ourselves about our future. And this part is insanely cool. This is about a neurochemical called glutamate. Glutamate is the neurochemical that's living in your brain that enables you to make decisions. You may have been experiencing in the day-to-day life of a modern human intense decision fatigue, where your brain feels so fatigued that sometimes even when you finish work, the thought of opening your fridge and figuring out what to cook for dinner is like game over, sends you into complete overwhelm and distress. Now, interestingly, it's estimated that human beings, for 99% of human history, were making about 2,500 decisions a day. So what that means is 2,500 glutamate molecules crossing around in what's called your prefrontal cortex behind your forehead. These are for our early hunter-gatherer ancestors. This Harvard review, whilst it might have estimated it pretty high, suggested that it can now in the modern world be up to 35,000 decisions a day. Imagine that for your prefrontal cortex. And what I mean by this is in the front of your brain, you have your prefrontal cortex. This is your intelligent, sustained attention, long-term thinking, smartest part of you and who you are today. If you make too many decisions, you clog it with glutamate. So rather than it being a nice natural amount of glutamate that your brain can manage, like our early ancestors had, it gets clogged with glutamate. And this research study showed that if you clog the lateral prefrontal cortex with glutamate, that part of the brain begins to shut down and doesn't activate right. So that means your long-term strategic, sustained attention thinking part of your brain begins to just be like, nah, I'm done, guys, I'm done. And you may have experienced this, and trust me, I've experienced this too. And how this manifests is you're thinking, oh, I just can't get myself to focus on this task. I can't get myself to do it. So then you're like, oh, look at this Instagram Reels. I just nailed that for a bit. And what's happening is because your prefrontal cortex is full of glutamate, your brain starts craving short-term reward because it moves into the more primitive, primal part of your brain that's just like a dopamine-seeking machine. Therefore, we have to figure out how to make less decisions so that your glutamate molecules are less clogged up in your prefrontal cortex. If you imagine this as an actual day, let's say we have this dude called Henry the hunter-gatherer, and Henry's going to be our new friend that we're going to learn about. Henry's living in the year 12,500 BC, and he's living with a tribe of 150 people in their different huts. Henry then wakes up one morning and he's like, okay, what should I do today? I'm gonna go and sit with the tribe for a bit, get the fire warm again, and I'm gonna have a chat about whether we should look for berries or go hunting for meat. After that chat, they decide we're gonna go hunting for meat, and Henry heads out for his day of hunting. In an alternative dimension, Henry then goes through a teleportation machine, and he's still Henry the hunter-gatherer, but now he's got to adopt a modern lifestyle and a modern working experience. So Henry wakes up in the morning to his alarm going off at 6 a.m. and he thinks, wow, that's a pretty stressful sound, and he picks his phone up and he thinks, wow, 12 WhatsApps, that's quite a lot of WhatsApps, so let me just quickly scan there, and glutamate's building in his brain, he's scanning through his WhatsApps, he thinks, whew, that's a lot, gets out of bed and he starts walking towards the toilet and starts looking through his emails, and his boss is annoyed at him and he's got an issue with one of his clients, and he's like, oh God, that's a lot of decisions to make, and then he sits down on the toilet and starts scrolling through Instagram Reels to numb the stress that he's just experienced. He heads downstairs, he's now in a bit of a rush because he's taken too long on his phone in the morning. He's sitting having his breakfast and he thinks, oh, I forgot to pay for my kid's class trip. So he's quickly putting his bank details into his phone. And then finally he's heading out the door with his son and he gets a notification from his Whoop and it says, wow, 34% recovery, you slept terribly. He thinks, oh no, I've slept terribly, so now my day is gonna be terrible. And what you can see is Henry's had two very different mornings. He's had this nice, chilled, few decisions morning, and then this overwhelm of decisions first thing when he wakes. So then, Henry the hunter-gatherer in 2026 sits down at his desk to work and he's like, right, I've got to sustain my attention and focus on something and have a good attention span. But his glutamate is clogged up in his prefrontal cortex. So he sits there and he thinks, nope, can't sustain my attention. And then the brain craves easy reward and he's like, right, I'm gonna scroll my phone. And then he fatigues himself further in the phone. And this is the center of the challenge in the modern world. Because we're so afraid of spending our mornings in boredom, we're fatiguing our brain before we even try and work. So then when we work, we can't focus on anything. So therefore, your experiment is here. This is going to be all about developing a boring morning routine with less decisions. And what's funny here is it won't even be boring once you get used to being in less stimulation, but effectively it is that sort of idea. And this is very much just starting your day every day with some form of dopamine detox. But really, and this should become the new language, it's actually not just a dopamine detox, it's a glutamate detox as well. And I honestly believe glutamate is having an even bigger impact on our day-to-day life now because of this fatigue that our brain has. Because attention spans aren't just breaking because we're nailing short form videos. That is a big, big contributor. But they're breaking because our brain is more fatigued than ever in human history. So you wake up tomorrow morning and you're like, so I watched that random brain dude on YouTube yesterday. I should probably start watching those every week so I can do these experiments to improve my brain. But I watched him and now I've got to wake up and be bored. So I wake up, maybe your iPad is going to be your alarm instead of your phone, so you're less pulled into the notifications, and always your phone should be on airplane mode when you wake. If I was to wake and see a list of stuff on this phone, there is no way I wouldn't look at it all. So the phone needs to be on airplane mode and you wake up and you're like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to not stimulate myself. I'm not going to make lots of decisions. I'm going to be just like Henry the hunter-gatherer, but I live in the modern world. So I'm going to go brush my teeth because modern humans do that. I might have a shower. I might go to the toilet. Instead of scrolling on the toilet, I'm going to read a book or I'm going to sit in the quiet. I'm going to go and make my breakfast. I might get the kids up and get them ready for school, but I'm not going to look at email and I'm not going to look at WhatsApp and I'm not going to go on Instagram because I'm not going to flood my brain with glutamate and put myself into the executive control network and lose that beautiful default mode network time. If you're watching this and you're thinking, yeah, I want to absolutely nail this. I want a brain that feels and performs at 10 out of 10 level. You want to be waking up brushing your teeth, going straight out for a walk, immediately out for a walk. We have tens of thousands of people doing this at Dose Lab, and it's revolutionary. It seems so basic, but it's revolutionary because you go out there, your attention is getting this rest, your default mode, your daydreaming network begins to activate. You start coming up with good ideas about, actually, I really want to nail that project. And I really do want that big long-term goal. I want to achieve that. How am I going to achieve that? What are the decisions I'm going to make? I'll tell you what, one of them will probably be sitting down on your computer and sustaining your attention for a prolonged period of time. So you start building this motivation in the quiet. You're not flooding your brain with the glutamate, so you're not fatiguing yourself. And then you get to this wonderful point, which I got to experience the other day when I was writing, where I sat down at my computer and I thought, okay, I'm just going to open this computer, and before I look at the WhatsApp and email, I'm going to start writing. Now, the interesting thing here is that might be an option for you. You might be working on projects personally that you can just open your computer and start at the start of the day and try and have a long period of focus. Or maybe you're working within an organization where you have to check in on the comm. If that's the case, when eventually you sit down at your computer and you're going to see a screen for the first time that day, and for context, like, always make a laptop the first screen I see, never make a phone the first screen you see. You'll be shocked at how different your relationship with tech becomes. If it is going to be the laptop and you can't just go straight into the task, which would be the best thing you can do, if you've got to check the comms, give yourself a timer. Say to yourself, okay, 5 minutes max, no social media, no YouTube, no LinkedIn, no Instagram, nothing, none of that. And you're just going to open, let's say, WhatsApp and email, 5 minutes, make sure everyone's aware of what you're doing, select your project, and then go. Because if you do too much decision making first thing, all you're gonna do is clog the glutamate, and then you're gonna crave the short-term reward. This is gonna be your experiment, the boring, less decision morning. It'd be so good if you can bring others along with you on this experiment. Maybe you live with your partner, you got kids or family or a friend that you live with, and then you can say to them specifically this: I watched some video about the brain on YouTube. I'm gonna try and make sure my attention span becomes really, really strong, because that's very, very important in the modern world and for my future. How I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna wake up and have a really boring, low stimulation morning. And this is gonna activate this thing called your default mode network, which is actually where you come up with really good ideas for your future, which is gonna be really beneficial. And then the double benefit we're gonna have is when we're having these boring mornings, not gonna activate glutamate in our prefrontal cortex. And they'll be like, what the hell is glutamate? And you'll be like, oh, it's this decision-making molecule in our brain that's causing that fatigue and decision fatigue that makes us crave our phones. And they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? And you'll just go through the process of explaining it. Boring mornings, default mode network, good ideas, less glutamate, less decision fatigue, better sustained attention. And by sharing the idea with them, you're gonna deeply understand this concept in your brain, and you're gonna take action on it. And you can take action on this straight after this video and immediately experience a change in your attention span forever. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I massively appreciate your attention. I really hope this experiment works. Come back and let me know any challenges you have. I'm super dialed into helping you guys in the comments here. And just so you know, if you are really struggling with the brain rot, I've made another video that could support you just here.